Colonel David Barnes could not contain his amusement as he stared around the large conference room and studied the shocked faces staring back at him. Moments earlier, the Colonel, alongside his doppelganger, Detective Inspector Dave Barnes, had stepped out of an underground transport carriage. He was then surrounded by a dozen soldiers and forced to suffer the ignominy of being led handcuffed through a strange, vast complex to the room they were currently standing in. But as he stepped through the doorway, Barnes struggled to hide his glee on witnessing the shocked expressions of those gazing back at him. However, the stunned silence only lasted a few minutes, and he felt a moment of satisfaction as he watched the group turn on Dave to express their displeasure at allowing Barnes in. As the group of people continued to argue amongst themselves, Barnes took a moment to study his new surroundings. He was standing in a large, circular room, in the middle of which was an enormous wooden desk with two flat, antique-looking computer screens sitting on top. On the far side was a medium-sized square window that appeared to overlook a command centre. He stifled a laugh of contempt at the inferior level of technology on display. Seriously, was this the best these people had? It was pathetic. "How dare you bring him here?" On hearing the snarling, accusatory voice, Barnes focused his attention back to the room. A tall, dark-haired, 30-something man took an angry step forward. His piercing blue eyes flashed with anger, and he seemed to be struggling to contain his emotions. From the way the stranger carried himself and his impeccable suit, Barnes deduced he was somebody in authority. The commander of this base, possibly. Barnes watched Dave take a step forward, placing himself in front of the Colonel. Was he trying to protect his counterpart from the stranger's wrath? Barnes wasn't sure, but he could tell he was trying to argue his case for him. Barnes's upper lip curled up in disgust, and he gave his doppelganger a look of disdain. He was identical in appearance to the Colonel, so much so that anyone seeing them for the first time might have assumed him to be a relation of the Colonel, a twin brother perhaps. Colonel Barnes shot a contemptuous look at the back of his doppelganger's head. Every fibre of his being burned as he fought the urge to reach up and snap the neck of this copy. Yes, that was what he was, an inferior copy. Although Barnes knew that physically he showed the scars of battle, with a long scar running down his face and his physique lean and muscular from years of training, his copy was the exact opposite. The overweight figure and smooth, scar-free face, although unshaven, were evidence of someone who had an easy life, not having experienced the same pains as his counterpart. How dare he call himself his duplicate? He was an embarrassment, something that should have been drowned at birth. Barnes let out a snort of disgust and turned his attention to the other people in the room. He looked quickly to his right as a tall, broad-shouldered black woman wearing a military uniform moved away from him. He searched his memory for her name. What did his doppelganger call her? Ah, yes, Lieutenant Kendra Goines. He smirked to himself, remembering his encounter with her in Dave's home. He had hoped to test her mettle by antagonising her. It was just unfortunate that she saw through his ruse, so he never got a chance to assess her skills as a warrior. "John, calm down. He's here to help." On hearing the raised voice, he focused his attention back on the two arguing men and watched with amusement as Dave put his hand on John's arm in an attempt to stop him from moving any further. Aghast, John looked at Dave in disbelief and shook his arm loose. "How can you say that after what he did to Claire?" He spat, angrily pointing to Barnes. At the mention of Claire's name, Barnes's eyebrows creased together in puzzlement. He cocked his head as he searched his memory and then gave a small nod of understanding. Ah yes, Claire Tully, the history professor. According to the last report he had read, she and his counterpart had formed some sort of romantic relationship. Had something happened to her? The thought of Tully's relationship with his doppelganger stirred a long-buried memory within Barnes of someone he had not thought of for years. He stared up at the ceiling and felt a pang of regret as memories he had long forgotten came flooding back to him.